Hello, this is Daniel Kosman speaking. I would like to show you the K-Vallo plugin for SAP. Before I do this, I would like to come back to the first video where I've shown you the outcome of the price formula calculation. We had a price formula which was agreed between the buyer and the supplier. We had specifications of individual material items, and we exploded the specification against the price formula and received a pricing for each material item. The result of the explosion of the specification with the price formula is a setup price, a changeover price, and a run-on price individually for each material item. By doing so, during the quarter or the following period, any production volume can be produced with any number of variants. The price will always be the accurate agreed price. Alternatively, a single price can be defined. If a single price is defined for a quarter or for a period, then a certain assumption needs to be made up front. It needs to be assumed what is going to be the average call-off volume, and it needs to be assumed what is the average number of variants. If those assumptions can be made, then a single price can be calculated. The advantage of a single price is that SAP can deal very well with single prices. The single price can be entered to the info record or to the contract of SAP, and when there is an MRP run and requirements are defined, then using this price, purchase orders can be made automatically with standard SAP functionality. The disadvantage of having a single price is that at the end of the period, the actual average call-off volumes and the average number of variants can be reviewed, and if there's a variation, either supplier or the buyer loses. Normally, when the average print run quantity is lower than the assumed print run quantity, the supplier will ask for additional money because the assumptions have lowered the price unfavorable for him. To avoid those discussions about actual average print runs and effective print runs, we recommend with the K method and K-Vallo to use setup, changeover, and run-on pricing. The disadvantage of setup, changeover, and run-on pricing is that it is not a standard SAP functionality. This means in return we have developed an SAP plugin so SAP can handle setup, changeover, and run-on prices. Let us have a look at this SAP plugin. And we see here those new functions we have added with the K-Vallo plugin. Let's have a look at the classes. Classes are what we call labels, and let's have a look what we have in those labels. As you can see here, the class of label has defined several attributes. Those attributes have a data type, like numeric or characteristics, and this numeric one has 10 digits and 2 digits after the comma, and it has a base unit of measurement, which is millimeter. Very important is the last column, which has tick boxes. Why is that? We have defined setup prices and we have defined changeover prices. A setup price will be higher than a changeover price, because setups typically require much more effort than a changeover, which is only changing a printing plate. The MRP run will deliver a list of materials which need to be ordered and be a part of the purchase order. So what we want to avoid is that every material item will trigger a full setup. So the idea is what we do in this module, in the K-Vallo module for SAP, is we sort the list of requirements coming from the MRP run in such a way that there is a minimum number of setups. The way how to sort the list of requirements is that we group material items into what we call a format group, which is basically the same as a material group in the K-Vallo web module. So the idea is that all material items in a format group match the relevant criteria. So what we have ticked here is the relevant criteria for being in the same format group. So we have ticked here for the labels class, we have said if two labels have the same width, the same length, that means they have the same die cut mold, if they are using the same printing technology, which is in this case if the same printing technology, which can be either offset, either flexo, either silkscreen printing, or a combination of two of those, and if the two labels have the same polymer type, and if they have the same shape, which is a very specific characteristic, then those two labels are in the same format group. That means if two labels are in the same format group, there will be one setup for this format group, and changing between the two labels, the variance, there will be only a changeover, which is much cheaper. So what this tick list is controlling is it's helping to minimize the number of setups on a list of requirements coming from the MRP run. The next thing I'm going to show you is the specification of an individual material item. We have seen before, we have seen the list of attributes to the class of labels, and now we look at the specification of each individual label. I'm looking at the label with the number 175. I am selecting a view, and I'm selecting the view of classification. So what you see is the specification of the label 175. And what we see here is we see the width and the length. And if you remember, if two labels have the same width, the same length, have the same technology and the same polymer, then they can be grouped in one format group. So here we have the specification. But if you remember well from the first video that we are using the the specification also to explode against the price formula in order to determine the setup, changeover and run-on price. So we have in two systems twice the same specification. Let me just have a show you this. We look at the material 175, which belongs to the material group 30,033. Let's have a look at this. Let's look at the specification, and here you can see this label has the length of 180 and the width of 180 and the length of 192 millimeters, and it's printed with 6 colors offset. And here you see it's offset printing, number of colors is 6, no flexo, no silk screen printing. In order to avoid redundant entry of specification, those two specification databases are synchronized with each other. So you can either operate it in such a way that one database is the leading one and the other one will automatically receive a copy of it, or you can make them both leading, and that means any change in one of them will trigger a change of the other one. Our proposition is to use both leading. That means you will have in the beginning allow the supplier to enter the data and feed your database, so you don't need to, when you start the system, the buyer does not need to populate all the data. This is something the supplier can do, and then once the database of all the specification is populated, the interface is switched, and then SAP becomes the leading database, and packaging development will enter the data, and then it will be automatically transferred to the K-Vallo web module. The next thing is we have now specified the individual material item. Let's have a look at the info record now. Let me just go into the info record. We have the purchasing organization 100 for the plant Dijon. And what you can see in the info record under the conditions, I'm taking the last acted one, is the price of 42.12. That is, if we come back, is the run-on price, which has been calculated by the system for the item 30.033. So you see here the 42.12. So standard SAP can only hold 42.12, and what the K-Vallo SAP plugin does is it adds a table to this info record, so it expands the info record. So I'm going up there, and this is the info record, the maintain info record separate changeover. So we're looking now at the material 175 again. We're looking at the vendor, which is the vendor SO2, the purchasing organization is 1000 and the plant is Dijon again. So this is the info record extension which carries the price type setup and the price type changeover. You see the 535 euros 96 for the setup, and that is exactly the price which you see here. And those prices, all three prices, the run-on price, which is in the core of the info record, and the setup and changeover prices, which is in the extended info record, all those three prices do not need to be manually entered to SAP, because they are automatically transferred via a web service interface to SAP. The last thing I'm going to show you now is the actual purchase order generation. We're going now to the transaction of the purchase order generation. So I'm going to this transaction, and as you can see, the system is compiling something. That's because we're using a test system, and it's the first run after an upload. So what you see here is now the purchase orders from our requisition, and we are now looking at the first purchase order. What we see here is now the purchase order with its different line items, which are individual materials. It is the purchase order quantity, and it's the net price using the quantity times the run-on and the distribution of the setup to all of them which are in the same format group, and a changeover before every item. You can see that for the position 175 very well, where the run-on cost is 42.12, and there is a surcharge of 5.39 coming from the setup and the changeover which has been agreed. What we do now is dynamically on the last moment we want to change the quantities. So now the quantity can be changed, and the change of the quantity means that the setup for the total format group is distributed over a different quantity, and that means the price will change. That means when an item in a format group will have a changed quantity, then every item in the format group will have a changed price. So if we increase the quantity, it means the price will go down per 1,000 pieces. So let me just enter here, instead of 15,000, I will enter 60,000, and I will press the carriage return, and the prices will change. And you see it is not sorted by material group. You see here the price has changed, and prices of the same material group have been also changed automatically.